Welcome to Smashed Avo Property. Today I'm speaking with Dave Hukka. He's a young gun who just finished a renovation on his first investment property. He talks us through the process, some of the mistakes that he made, and how he's now leveraging to put a second source of income on the property.
Capital growth is what I'm after primarily, but if every property is costing $100 a week or so to manage, and if you've got 10 properties, then that's very risky, especially if then you have vacancies around. So just keeping it managed, and I think having a granny flat, that's a strategy that I'm going for, certainly helps with that.
As always, seek your own professional financial, legal, taxation and property investing advice for your current situation. Everything we talk about is just our opinion and general in nature and should never be considered as personal advice. So without any further ado, let's get house hunting with Dave. Dave Hukka, welcome to Smashed Avo Property.
Mate, thanks so much for having me. Happy to be here.
Mate, I'm super keen to jump into your story. We're just having a little bit of a chit chat beforehand, and I think there's a ton of things that we'll get into and the listeners will like, but to give us a little bit of a breakdown, you want to give us your 30-second spiel?
Yeah, stoked to get into it, eh? So I'm 24. I live in Newcastle. I work in marketing for an engineering company. And on the side, I also do my own video production company doing like weddings, corporate videos, events, and all that sort of stuff. I'm one property down in my investment journey and super keen to get started for the rest of it.
That's awesome. And talk us about your work life. Did you get a degree in that? How did you transition into that? And was that always the focus? And then how did the video side come into it?
Yeah, so video's always been there. I remember when I was about 10 years old, filming short YouTube videos with a little camcorder camera. And that passion for video production's always been there. Late high school, I sort of transitioned to actually doing paid jobs, registered an ABN, and all through university, I've always had that as a side income. And then over time, that's just built up and up and up. And now it's actually making a decent income alongside my full-time job. I did a marketing degree at university, and technical skills, maybe not so much, but the best thing that I got out of my degree was the connections. I was able to step straight into a full-time job. And at this stage of my property investment journey, having that stable income is super important for me. That's what the banks are very keen to see. They're not so keen on, part-time income or casual self-employment.
Yeah, that's cool. That's super cool. You got a side hustle going and it's actually bringing in a good stream of income. I guess that's what I'm trying to do with the podcast, and I'm not quite there yet. So, yeah, exactly. But people are loving it, which is all that matters and all that I want to get out of it. So that's super cool, man. And I think, I do want to get more into how the banks handle the side hustle and that sort of income against having a solid job. And I think that's where a lot of,
for sure.
It's something that I've kind of not struggled with, but always had in the back of my head. I've always had a solid career and a solid income. And I think that's been, so crucial in allowing me to keep borrowing money and build a portfolio as we go. Whereas if I was to jump into, jump into a part-time job that I really wanted to do and pursue, but, income wasn't strong, then I wouldn't be able to borrow as much. And is that stopping you in a way from taking your side hustle to a full-time thing, or how does that kind of look?
It is actually, yeah. Long term, the dream is to turn my business into a full-on career, to pursue that. But very much at the moment, it is very much kind of a leash. It's tethering me to that full-time job. I don't want to leave the corporate world. I have a 9-to-5 desk job. Actually, prior to COVID, I was actually flying around the country from to site, taking pictures and videos. So I'm actually trying to secure funding for a granny flat for one of my properties at the moment, and I'll get into that. And that has been quite a journey. I'm actually on JobKeeper payments at the moment. It's full time, so the company pays the rest of it. But just because banks see that as, I guess, a form of welfare almost, they're asking all these questions. And my broker described it to me as prior to COVID, banks were doing things to help you get a loan, help you secure a finance. But now they're actually actively looking for ways to stop that. So, I'll JobKeeper, red flags, let's ask all these extra questions. And being able to count my side business as income for a loan is particularly difficult, looking through all the tax records, providing as much info as I possibly can. It's a lot of paperwork. But hey, I mean, because, doing this side business is what I love, and because it is extra income, I think it's a fantastic position to be in.
Oh, 100%. It's pretty funny to realize like how many people around Australia would be on JobKeeper or JobSeeker or some sort of, government support. And it's, as you say, like being frowned upon from the banks. And I get it in some retrospect, but when you're in this environment, like everyone's going to be in the same position. So, but I guess, they do have to be super critical in who they lend to and why they're lending and how much they're lending and all that sort of stuff. So
that's it. Yeah. And I think end of September will be a big turning point, because that was meant to be the cutoff. And now it's, I don't even know fully. There's like different split tiers as to who's getting what. So I think after that deadline, there'll be a little bit more clarity around what happens going forward.
Yeah, and even the bank deferrals and stuff. I don't know if you took advantage of it, but I think they're getting pushed out as well now. So seems to be keeping longer. And so what they're doing is, there was all this talk of this September cliff, and they're like, we're all going to fall off the end, and sort of sporadically pushing it out now, which is kind of cool to see. But it's going to be super interesting. Like, I'm based in Melbourne, so obviously the last couple of weeks have been pretty hectic. So hopefully, it's contained at the moment, or getting contained as we're in lockdown, and the it doesn't happen to the rest of the country as well, and hopefully we can sort of start to kick back into gear again. Yeah, that's super cool. And how does, where did the property side of things come in? Like, was it just something that you wanted to do? Did you want to live there? Or was it always in the back of your head to get into investing?
Yeah, I've always been, I've always been keen to get into property. I've wanted to, generate wealth and store wealth in some capacity. Stocks are cool. I do have a stock portfolio, but, property is physical. It's something tangible. And also the way you can add value to a property, build equity through a renovation is super appealing. So I did a decent sized renovation on my property that we'll chat about in a bit. But I think because I do want to pursue my own video business full-time in the future, it can be a bit volatile. It can be a bit up and down. And I want to have the financial security and peace of mind of a real estate portfolio right there to fall back on, just in case. Yeah,
that's super cool. And so you're from Newey, and you've had the opportunity to fly around the country for your job, which is pretty cool.
That's it, yeah.
So did you buy a Newey or did you buy somewhere else?
I knew you were going to go there. Oh, man. Hey, so in the year before purchasing my first property, reading all the books, all the podcasts, talking to people, surrounding myself with a team of people, there was so much advice telling me to go in every single direction. Southeast Queensland is a hotspot at the moment, apparently. And I actually seriously considered, I was about to pull the trigger on hiring a buyer's agent to purchase a property there. But in the end, I decided not to, because I can take advantage of the first homeowner stamp duty exemption, living in the property for 6 months, and being able to renovate the property over those 6 months was vital to, essentially build a little bit of equity there, which was so important on my first house to sort of kickstart my investment journey. Local. Would you want to get into numbers?
I think that's fine. I think buying in Newey, I've got an issue when someone's got 10 properties on the same street. That's my biggest issue. But I think, for your first one, not that it's not okay to buy in the area that but as long as you've done your research and you've done your due diligence and you've run the numbers, Newcastle's done really well over the last 10 years. You know what I mean? And so it's not that it's a bad investment or the wrong decision. It's just about understanding where you are buying, and then when you go to the next one, diversifying out and all that sort of stuff as well. So I think, everyone does it. Everyone buys near their backyard just for that comfort reason. And I think as you said, as you learn and you read and you develop, and then the fundamentals in the back of your head. So as long as you understand the fundamentals, then, there's nothing really wrong with it. And as you said, I mean, I've always said like I'd use a buyer's agent if I bought in another state, which I did on my last purchase. And so, as you said, like you were thinking about going down the buyer's agent part, but you had confidence in your own ability to source and understand the fundamentals to buy the first property. So there's nothing generally wrong with that, I don't think. Let's get into the numbers. How much of a deposit did you save? Did it take a while? Did you have money management skills before wanting to buy a property?
All the Excel spreadsheets. So like the great thing about working through university was that I actually was paying off my HECS debt before I even graduated. So I had some savings right there. And then over the first year of full-time work out of uni, I was able to save up about 65, 70 grand. So numbers. So my first property was about 350K. It was in decent condition. It was a 3-bedder, but it was all about the location. It's near a new housing development. It's not too far from the M1. The travel down to Sydney, and there's new shopping centres going up all around the place. Like I know that over the next 5-10 years, I can see a fair bit of growth potential for this property. So I put down 45K for the deposit. So it works out at being about 13%. So I didn't pay too much LMI on that.
Yeah, it's kind of in the sweet spot. I think on my last purchase, I think we did like 88% or something. And there's kind of like this level, my mortgage broker was telling me there's kind of like this level where LMI sweet spot,
it drops a bit.
Yeah, it drops a little bit, and then like you can still leverage quite a bit off it as well. So, but it's not as expensive. So it sounds like it was around that area. That's cool. And did it take a while to save 45K, or did it come quite naturally? Like, were you doing it over the years you're at uni?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure this is a common theme amongst young investors. Social life seems to be the thing that takes a bit of a hit. I think that's actually one of the mistakes that I made, and I'll get into that a bit later. But like, you have to enjoy life, but to save, you do need to sacrifice some things like that. So social life took a bit of a hit, but even just learning to live quite frugally. I was lucky enough to live at my parents' place, and I paid board, but just saving money here and there wherever I could. Money came in, and I would put most of each paycheck straight into my savings account, and over time that just kept adding up and up and up. And it's sort of an unreal feeling to look in your account and there's 50 grand there, 60 grand, 70 grand. It's crazy. And it's like, okay, I've actually got all of this buying power. I can actually, buy into the real estate market. It's sort of a surreal feeling when you first realize that, hey?
Yeah, super cool. And I love the way that you put it, because the way I think about it now is like, there's like the social life, and there's like the buying new things and buying new clothes and like keeping up with the Joneses, as they say. But like, if you can transfer that like serotonin hit or like good feeling to like seeing the money in your bank account like eventually increasing or compounding, like that's a good way to put it. Like that's what drove me.
I'm sure it doesn't come naturally for everyone. Like maybe we're just the weirdos that get a hit out of seeing your bank account rise. But it is important to enjoy nice things as well. But you can have a good life on a budget. That's important to know.
Yeah, 100%. And so was it talked about in the household? Like, would you sit around the family table and talk about money, or was it kind of just your own sort of intuition?
Yeah, no, not really. So that's actually sort of one of the other reasons that I wanted to begin investing. So my parents, they're approaching 60 now. And I mean, awesome people, but they do own their own house, but they still have a couple of $100,000 on it. So growing up, we wouldn't be able to go out and buy a new car. You wouldn't be able to just go on a holiday at the drop of a hat. It'd be something we'd have to save up throughout the year for. So to not be in their position when I'm their age would be fantastic. I don't want to be, super wealthy and live a life of excess. I think in their minds it was more, you spend your life working, you buy a house, and that's the house you're paying off for the rest of your life. And things like investing in stocks wasn't even talked about. It's been, mostly the research that I've done myself, making connections, building that, team of people around, it's what's driven me into getting into property.
Yeah, it's so interesting because that's a question I ask all of my guests now, and it's so interesting to see like the different dynamics in the household. So some people, come from, a lower socioeconomic background and then like they want to get out of that or don't want to be in the same scenario. Others like come from a wealthy family, but then like also get those fundamentals distilled in them from when they're a young age, and then like they succeed and push through as well. And then there's like, I want to know where the sweet spot is with like fairly comfortable income, like never have to worry about money as per se, but not like, but that doesn't get distilled into the younger generation. Like I want to find the divide. Like I really want to understand.
It's a really, really interesting question. I don't know if there is one. I think it's more about, I don't think it's about income. I think it's about expenditure, because you can have, a household of both parents on 100, 150K a year. And if they, buy a new car every year, if they go on holidays all the time, then they're not going to be saving that much. And if that, investment mentality isn't distilled into the kids, like you were saying, then they're not going to carry that along to the next generation. And, if there was a household of just 100K income a year across both partners, but they have a real, maybe not frugal attitude towards spending, but they're just financially responsible, then they could save a lot. So I think it's just that education and that financial responsibility, that saving mentality.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're spot on with expenses. Like it's all what you spend. So it doesn't matter how much you earn. I know people that earn 40 grand a year and have bought a property. So, and it's just taking them longer to save the amount of money that they needed for a deposit, and eventually they got there. So I think you're spot on. So what was the hardest part? Was it saving? Was it giving up the social life? I mean, what really took its toll?
Yeah, giving up the social life was a thing. But I mean, I do enjoy what I do. I'm a little bit of a workaholic. I don't know, probably saving just the research and then actually jumping into the property market itself was probably the hardest part, like since saving just kind of came naturally. So there was the whole debate about where to buy, Brisbane or, somewhere else, or here in Newey that I decided to go for. But then there was the whole thing about getting my mind around the, like not wanting to invest emotionally and just looking at the numbers. So my parents, and me as well, I'm guilty of it. I was like, but I want to live in this suburb. I want to live in, I like the layout of this house. It's, personally, I like that. And I guess there is something to be said about if I like it, then tenants might like it. But no, I had to get out of that mindset and like, no, it's just an investment property. It's numbers. If there's growth potential, if, there's no serious structural issues with the house, if cash flow is going to be decent, if the numbers work out, then that's okay. So getting that investment mindset, and you can listen to podcasts like yours, you can read books, but actually, when it's your hundreds of thousands of dollars that you're playing with, that you're putting on the line, that's where the rubber meets the road and it gets real.
Yeah, and that's when the emotions kick in too. Like all these cognitive biases, and like you're just like all of your background and history really plays into the part of it as well. Like where you grew up, the areas that you grew up in, where your friends lived, all that sort of stuff. And you kind of, when you're about to take the plunge, you look back and think about all these places, and then like it just becomes like, my first property took me 6 months to buy just because I was so like analysis paralysis. Like I was just trying to analyze everything that I possibly could. I grew up in Sydney, but lived in Melbourne. So I just like had so many areas I could have potentially bought in. Like, it's great.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up. It's definitely a good one. But I had Chris Gray on the podcast last week, and he's built a massive portfolio over a number of years. And he said one thing that really resonated with me is you're buying a spreadsheet. Like you're buying, you're buying the numbers, and that's all it should be. It shouldn't be that emotional purchase. Specifically if you're buying an investment, you know what I mean? Or if you're buying a family home, there are obviously other things that come into play, like where you want to live and all that sort of stuff. But strictly for investment purchases, you buy.
Look, in the end, I'm very glad that I made the decision and purchased the property that I did. I actually made offers on 3 other properties prior to that, and was like other offers were made, and with one of them, actually signed the contract, and then in the building and pest inspection, there was some termite damage and water damage, so I passed on that one. But in a lot of these other properties that I was looking at, I was around 450. So I was right at the top of what I was pre-approved for. But now that now that there are tenants in the property and it is, like you said, just a spreadsheet, it's really, it's hitting me like, okay, it is just numbers. It is just a spreadsheet. If I had a $450,000 loan, my LVR would be very different. And, like cash flow wise, it would certainly be a lot harder on my week-to-week bank account, especially with my being on JobKeeper payments currently. Banks might look at it a little bit differently.
Yeah, 100%. I think it would be a hard one to overcome. Maybe talk to us, because I haven't really addressed the topic of like signing a contract and then it falling through or like not being happy with your building and pest inspection. So did you put like an initial settlement or initial like little deposit down to hold the property when you signed the contract? And then obviously you paid for a building and pest inspector after that. So you would have been down like maybe less than $2,000 or something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't much. So a mate of mine's dad is actually, he does building and pest inspections. So I was able to get a bit of a discount on that. But even still, there was that small deposit. Like I believe it's less than 1%. But losing just a couple of grand is a whole lot better than losing, being committed to a property with serious structural damages. For the next 3 decades or so.
100%. And I think that's
a long term. Yeah.
And I'm gonna nitpick on this because I think
go for it.
Yeah, cool. Because I think like, it's probably a really good one for first time investors and something. So and I want everyone listening to understand that like, it's okay to sign a contract and put your initial deposit down and do all your due diligence and everything like that. And it's okay if you're going to lose a couple of grand, because as Dave just said, like you don't want to, it could have cost him 50, 60, 30 grand even to fix the issues that were in the property. But by moving on and sacrificing, he's only relayed the issue down to a couple of grand or whatever it may be. And from your point of view now, would you always do a building and pest inspection before you signed a contract?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was another mistake that I made. But I mean, agents are tricky. I'm sure you've dealt with a lot of them, like putting the pressure on, especially when there's a whole lot of other offers. There are actually about 5 other offers made on the property that I bought currently. And I was about $2,000 ahead of the closest one. And yeah, I mean, like I said, it's where the rubber meets the road. It's, it's intense, it's high pressure. And sometimes you don't have time to wait 2 or 3 days to get a building inspector out there to look around it. You just have to sign on that dotted line.
Yeah, 100%. And that's that's the thing with the type of markets too. Like when you're in a heated seller's market and everyone, as you say, you got 5 buyers on the same property, which is a good thing because you know that other people want to buy it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But when push comes to shove and you've got to make a decision, and real estate agents are like, I can talk negatively or I can talk about them because my dad is one, so that's fine. And I love real estate agents. Like, don't get me wrong, but like they do play little tricks. Like they'll call you at 6:30 at night, and you have to make a decision by tomorrow morning. And it's kind of like, well, you don't have any business hours time to call someone and get advice and make a decision or get a building and pest inspector out there. So. And if you're ever in that decision, and like obviously straight away your emotions are going to come into play, like you're going to either make a reactive decision or whatever it may be, but you can never trust where the other buyers are at. He's probably called the 5 other buyers at the same time and said exactly the same thing to try and get a solid offer on the line. So I would say, listen, this is where my offer's at. And if it's the strongest offer, then he's going to wait for you. And I would just say, listen, I'm going to get a building and pest inspector out there tomorrow or the next day. And then if that's all clear, I'm going to come and sign the contract. And, even that little pushback just to say, hey, I'm still keen, but just let me do my due diligence first. Like give me a break. It's a good way to push it back. But yeah, as Dave was saying, when you're in a heated seller's market and there's people making moves, it's almost impossible to try and get on top of everything that's happening and make sure you secure the property.
That's it, yeah. And I think just over time, you get more experienced in, dealing with agents, but looking at things like building and pest inspections, like looking at the property beforehand. And I think in a high pressure situation like that, it's better to, ultimately rely on your, your experience. That instinct will come after a while. But until that comes, probably best to err on the side of caution, I would say.
Yeah, 100%.
Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, 100%. I would always
Yeah.
be on the cautionary side, and and get a professional opinion too. Like if you're not a builder or anything
Mm.
like that, like it's
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
if you see a defect or see something that you think might be an issue, like get someone out there straight away. And as you say,
Mm.
just be on the caution side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Chances are it goes a lot deeper.
so you talked a little bit about not wanting to be like a millionaire and living the high lifestyle and all that sort of stuff. But what is your goal for investing? Is it just the passive income play? Is it just security? I mean, you talked a little bit there about not being in the same situations as your family was growing up. But is that the goal, or is there something a little bit more to it?
I mean, a passive income would be very nice, but it's honestly very hard to achieve. Even once the property's completely paid off, there's all of the management fees, there's rent, there's rent rates and insurance and all of that. I think that the best way to generate income is through capital growth and through building up that equity. So having a modest investment portfolio over the next 10 years, 20 years or so would be my goal. I don't look, plan is something that I'm still working on at the moment, but for the moment, short term, the goal is to have put a granny flat on this property that I currently have.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's good that you've got that in mind. You've got that retrospect. You've got the vision of where you do want to go and what the next step is. And I think that's super important as well. Like some people have pretty audacious goals, and it's just hard to, I think it's always good to just have that next step, and then like you can assess, because people who have audacious goals, it's all well and good. And, we're talking about beforehand, like having mindset and all that sort of stuff. But also in a way, like you're always going to have to derail some point. Like things are going to change dramatically. We're going to go through events like COVID, and some people might lose their job or something like that. And you're going to have to derail from that. So it's all well and good to have that long-term vision, but to also know exactly what your next step is probably more important. And so I love that you got that down packed. A little bit more about your specific property that you purchased. Is there like a negotiation strategy that you used? Is there like, specific strategy that you like? What is there anything more that you can give to us about it?
With the purchasing side or like post settlement?
Yeah, both. Like, is there anything in the purchasing side, and then like, how's it performed so far? Or like, is there something that, the listeners should be aware of?
Yeah. Okay. No, not so much in the purchasing side. Like I said, there are a whole bunch of offers, and it was that, like, being the first property I ever bought. There was that lack of experience going into it. So I was, on the phone with my broker. On the phone with it was my accountant, actually got some advice there, but neither of them were on the ground actually seeing the property, talking to the agent. So I just had to kind of go with what I thought best, made that offer, and worked out being $2,000 above the nearest offer, and I got it. I'm just incredibly lucky. That's for that.
Awesome.
So post settlement, the plan was always and has been to renovate the property over the 6 months that I live in there. And that renovation went very well. It cost about 13 grand. So new kitchen, new bathroom, floorboards, fresh coat of paint, like an aircon, all that sort of stuff to add value to it, to make it more appealing to tenants. And also to build up that equity. So I bought it for $350, and it's now worth 400,000. So 50 grand just from a 15 grand or 13 grand reno right there, which I think has been pretty good. And on top of all that, there's been the experience of actually, being there and doing it myself, which I wouldn't have got if it was in Southeast Queensland, for instance.
Yeah, getting your hands dirty and understanding what actually goes into a house and how things are built and structured and how things operate. That's awesome. And so when did you buy it?
November last year.
November. Oh wow, cool. So that's pretty good. That's especially like during the season that we've gone through, to get a evaluation through that as well. Like that's awesome. You've done really well there. Do you think it increased the rent as well potentially?
So no.
Okay.
So because as the rent went up, COVID also happened.
Yeah.
Which came down. And it's like, as a landlord, it's very difficult now. Like securing landlord insurance, for instance, was a nightmare in this market with tenants defaulting everywhere. Fortunately, the tenants that are in there, one of them is an essential worker. So there is that secure income. There's all the checks that the manager did beforehand. But it is a renter's market, or at least, here at the moment. So I guess the increase in negotiating power that they had sort of counteracted the renovation and the extra that I could have charged for that. But that's okay, because next year, hopefully, as restrictions lift and as COVID ends, hopefully, if there is a vaccine rolling out, then I might be able to put that up again.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, as you're saying, you're trying to do another play there with the granny flat on there. So I'm sure the equity from the renovation, given you can pull out the equity,
yes,
will help you leverage into that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's always been the plan.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I think, I was going to ask you about, your most successful strategy. And I think you've already alluded to that, is doing a little renovation and then using the equity to leverage into a granny flat, which will increase your cash flow again, which is awesome. But is there anything you're doing to manage your risks? Like, have you got a pretty good safety buffer, or like, how are you managing sort of your exit strategy, and how does that all look for you?
It certainly is a risky time at the moment. Having a big cash buffer is the best thing to have, just in case, let's say tenants default and like for a month or so they can't afford to pay. Having, 20, 30 grand or more in the bank, they're just sitting there. That's what I've got at the moment. When the granny flat actually goes ahead, that's going to go down a bit because of all the, landscaping and all of the adjustments there.
For sure.
But also, I think going for cash flow as well as capital growth. Capital growth is what I'm after primarily. But if every property is costing, $100 a week or so to manage, and if you've got 10 properties, then that's very risky, especially if then you have vacancies around. So just keeping it managed. And I think having a granny flat, that's the strategy that I'm going for, certainly helps with that. Because for a relatively small extra investment, the cash flow increases for that property.
Yeah, that's cool. I think, I was pretty bullish on just a capital growth play, like prior to COVID. And I still am. Like, I'll still take a capital growth property given I can hold on to it over a cash flow property. But I think, as you're like saying now and alluding to, like the cash flow is also really important, because if you can't afford to hold on to your capital growth property, then, you're going to have to sell it, and probably sell it at a time where you don't necessarily want to sell it, or it's not the best time in the market to sell it. So although you've gone for a capital growth play, you're not seeing any of it and potentially losing money if you can't afford to hold on to it. So I think I'm taking a more balanced view now. Like, I still would favor a capital growth property, but you also need good cash flow to support that as well, or be able to hold on to that. And I think COVID is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm sure that like later on, once you or myself are a more mature investor and we have, that decent sized portfolio of properties, we can start pursuing, properties specifically for capital growth, or maybe get one or two very high cash flow properties to essentially bankroll the other ones in case of a vacancy.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great play. So, mistakes. Time for the juicy moment. What can you give to us?
So wanting to go for that emotional, a purchase instead. So like I said, there were 3 other properties beforehand that I made an offer for that all fell out, and losing the cash in those ones. Even if they look nice on the surface, like the termite damage, the water damage on that property, it stings. Seeing that a couple of grand go out, that it's essentially lost forever. But like we were saying before, it's long-term gain. Yeah, it's heaps better to lose that short bit now than potentially many thousands of dollars more over the long term.
100%. And at the, after 10, 20, 30 years, you'll look back and it'll be minuscule compared to, the growth that you've seen on your property now, and it won't hit the bill. But at the time when you're, trying to find a property you've just saved for your deposit, there's a whole bunch of other costs that you have to pay for, a conveyancer and building and pest inspector and all that sort of stuff. It hits the back pocket pretty hard. Like you feel like you're getting set back. But yeah, as you say, if you keep that long-term view in play, then, it won't be as big of an impact.
Yeah, that's it for sure.
What about resources? So you say that you've read a couple of books and podcasts and everything. What's been a big one for you?
I'm not a huge reader. I mean, there's Rich Dad Poor Dad. The standard ones like that is A Random Walk Down Wall Street. But also I found that reading books outside of property investment specifically, like just related fields, are also super helpful. There's this really cool book called The Secrets of Power Negotiating. Have you heard of that one? It's by a guy called Roger Dawson. He's like an ex-FBI negotiator. It's insane. But in the book, there's like everything from like, talking to your spouse to actually, negotiating for a house. And just getting your head around all of these other fields related to property investment, even if it's like, negotiating or renovating, things like that, really helps. Just being a very well-rounded individual in that area. And yeah, podcasts, all the usual ones. There's Property Investory, Property Couch, Geared for Growth, of course, Smashed Avo. Love it.
Thanks, mate. I love that everyone has to add that one in the end. It's the best. Yeah, I've read a book that's quite similar actually. It's called Split the Difference. I can't remember the name of the author, but it's the same scenario. He's like he was like a hostage negotiator for the FBI or something like that.
Hey, could be the same guy.
Yeah, probably. But yeah, that was so good. Like it was just, there's so many insights into like the negotiating process and how your emotions play in and how to get more information out of, people or real estate agents, like how to like get them to talk a little bit more so that you can potentially get some more insight. So like, I think you're spot on with like other things. And I think one thing that we'll probably jump into next is, what motivates you is, having those morning routines, and I'm giving away your secrets here because we talked about it beforehand. But books about like your habits and your morning routines and all that sort of stuff. And you're saying that's a big one for you.
Yeah. I didn't used to do this, but I've actually done some videos for one of your previous guests, Jack Henderson. He's really big on that, and like there is really something to be said about like morning routines, like getting your head in the right space. A lot of the more successful people on earth have like they don't just go through life without a plan. They know what they're doing. I guess time is valuable when you're trying to juggle, 10 different things at the same time. Getting your head in that right mental space, knowing, what's coming and being prepared for it is super vital.
Yeah, 100%. And back onto the property thing, I'm kind of jumping around the questions here, but
go for it.
Flowing. What do you look out for when you're buying a potential property? Like, was there certain things that you were looking for, certain things that you were avoiding? How did that search go?
So the area, number one. I'm looking for, like I said, originally I was looking for capital growth. So looking for an area that does have potential to grow in the future. So the area that I bought in has like shopping centres going up around the place. There's a new estate going across the road. It's near to the freeway. So a lot of people in Newcastle work in Sydney or on the Central Coast. So easy access down there. Renovation potential would be the next thing that I looked in, because the plan was to add a fair bit of equity through that reno. I don't want a house that's been freshly renovated, that's got all, because they're going to be charging a premium because of that. So one that's in decent condition, but not, the serious structural damage. And then finally, potential for cash flow. So a granny flat in this case, it was a decent size. It was like a 640 square meter block. On a slope going down a hill. So I was able to put a fence in there, and then the next stage will be the granny flat going in there, increase that cash flow.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It looks like you've ticked all of your boxes too for what you were looking out for. So you've done a pretty good job. And finally, what advice would you give our generation to getting started?
Man, all right. I think so. Individuals that are our age that tend to be, looking into property, that tend to be a little bit more financially successful, I've seen normally sacrifice having fun, that social life. Like I mentioned before, there are ways to still have that and save. So find some balance between, going out and clubbing every week and, being a total introvert inside, just a workaholic. Find a way around that. I think like surround yourself with a team that know what they're doing. Like I've heard people say, you never want to be the smartest person in the room. Like as you start your investment journey, that'll naturally form, you'll need a broker, you'll need an accountant, you'll meet maybe potentially a buyer's agent. But also go out looking, try to contact people, like, people who, like most people are happy to talk, happy to share their journey. And that's what I've done. Just find out what other people know, what other people do, get to know them. Yeah.
Mate, I think that's super good advice. I think you're spot on there. Set yourself a budget of $100 a week or whatever. If you still enjoy going out, just have 2 or 3 drinks instead of spending $300 or $400. So
that's it. And that plays into the whole, headspace thing. If you're just working 24/7 and don't spend time to enjoy life or do what you do, then it's great. I mean, for me, it's because I do enjoy filming an event, like photography, video production. It sort of started as a hobby and now I get paid to do it. So it's sort of a cheat, a cop out for me, being able to do both at the same time.
That's awesome, mate. That's a win-win scenario.
That's it.
All right, Dave. Well, you've been an absolute killer today, mate. Thanks for coming on.
No worries, mate. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. We'll have to get you back on next time or next purchase. I love stories like these, and to my surprise, there's actually so many more millennials getting to the property market than I thought, and I really appreciate Dave taking the time to share his story. I know so many of you get motivated out of these types of success stories. I'm always looking for more guests to come onto the show. If you're under 30 and have 1 or more investment properties, whether it's good, bad or ugly, I would love to talk to you about it. Even if you're interested into getting into the property sector, let's have a chat. The main focus is to help other soon-to-be young investors with tips and tricks along the journey, learn from the mistakes that we have made, and ignite the fire to set themselves up financially for the rest of their lives. If you're interested in sharing a story, you can go to jordandeong.com/podcast, where there's a podcast inquiry button at the top that will guide you through the next steps. If you want to see what else I'm up to, you can go to YouTube and type in Jordan de Jong, where you'll find the Smashed Avo Property podcast being hosted on YouTube, and plenty of other content that I'm putting out consistently. If you're keen for more content like this, make sure you subscribe and please leave us a review with any feedback for future podcasts. And until next time, happy house hunting.